Okay, are we live? Are we there?
I'm here if you're here.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, folks. The intro of course, didn't work, but hey. Welcome, everyone. And I'm real excited about this one tonight. I know it was a little bit in the making, but we finally got here. I wanted to thank Dr. Tobler for being kind enough to reschedule with me. I had a little bit of a situation with my family that I had to deal with, but I'm really happy we're here this evening, and we've got some really cool things to talk about. So for those of you who may not know this gentleman, this is Dr. Michi Tobler, and he does a lot of work with our community and also at the University of Missouri. Michi, thanks for coming in with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to finally can make it happen.
I know. I'll tell you what, I want to let you know just how much it means to me with you being here. It's just when you came in September to our club to talk and you came into my house to see the fish room, it's like I just feel like we just really clicked. And I'm like, I'm going to ask him to do the stream with me, and what's the worst thing that could happen? He would say no. So I'm really happy that you're here. But for those that may not know who you are, could you take a moment just to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Michi. So I'm a professor at the University of Missouri in St. Louis, and I'm also a senior scientist at the St. Louis Zoo. I'm originally Swiss. I was born in Switzerland and didn't come over the ocean until I was in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm basically, I guess fish brought me here, and a woman kept me here. But yeah, I've always been a fish nerd essentially. Ever since I was a kid, my grandma gave me my first aquarium, and that kind of sealed the deal. But yeah, that's how I got to be here.
Cool. Well, we're lucky to have you here. For those of you that may not know, Dr. Tobler works with what some people call extreme fishes. So do you mind explaining a little bit of that for the folks, please?
Yeah, we work a lot with fish that live in places where you wouldn't expect to fish. So that's why we call them extremophiles. They live in extreme environments where some environmental variable is usually not conducive to survival of most fish. So that includes things like cavefish that are permanently dark, or I've spent a lot of my career studying fish in toxic springs that are rich in hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide is this gas that is associated with volcanism and oil deposits, and in some springs that's part of the water, and it's so toxic that most fish will die in a matter of seconds to minutes. Yet some fish survive there, and so for the past 20 or so years we've tried to understand, well, how do some fish survive in places where most other fish for sure, but really most forms of animal life can't really survive. And that's kind of become one focal point of my interests.
Okay. And you have a live bearer at your lab that's a molly, and forgive me, I forget which one it is, but you were just doing a video with Fritz a while back about
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Fritz was visiting our fish room.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if you have the opportunity to see that video, that's a good one. So that's on Fritz's YouTube channel, and it'll give you a really good idea of like how a fish lab is set up and all of it. And what's really nice is this gentleman will explain a lot of it to you. But you also do some work with a lot of organizations. You're working with the CARES program, which you help out with. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a while. You do confirmation with Pusiliot.
That's right. I mostly kind of look at the Pusiliets that come through the door and update their list on from time to time. So I think I've been involved in CARES for 10 or 12 years. I don't remember. It's been a long time that I've been sort of their coordinator for the Pusiliets.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch base on something that you sent to me a couple nights ago, and I'm like, this is the perfect thing to talk about. And by the way, if anyone has any questions, I'm going to ask if you could be so kind as to wait till the end, and I'll tell you why. You notice my wingman is in here. Brandon unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. So, you know me, guys, I get to talking and I'm not paying attention to the chat. So if you could be so kind, if you have any questions, we'll take care of those toward the end. So just hold on to them and I promise we'll get to them. So anyway, you sent me an article that you were part of writing that was just published in Amazonas magazine. And I'm really impressed with this article because it kind of ties in with what I share with my YouTube followers, where scientists and hobbyists are working cohesively for conservation. And the program is called Resolution 111, and there are quite a few conservation organizations inside doing this. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about it, please.
Yeah, Resolution 111 was spearheaded by a group of organizations. I think most importantly, it was folks from the New Mexico Biopark Society. This was folks from Shoal, which is a freshwater fish conservation organization. San Luis Zoo, where I work, also sponsored this. And so essentially what happens with the IUCN, that's a International Union for the Conservation of Nature, they have a big World Conservation Congress. I'm not sure every year, but I think it's every other year. Mm-hmm. But members can essentially submit motions to pass resolutions, and these resolutions really set sort of the plan for the organization as it moves forward. And so one of the big needs, conservation needs, that was recognized as part of this resolution is that a lot of freshwater fishes are critically imperiled. And while we have a lot of sort of ex situ conservation, so ex situ means away from the field, so meaning in zoos or other organizations, with a lot of ex situ conservation for things like birds and mammals and even some of the amphibians. We're really lagging much behind in terms of having these sort of captive conservation program for freshwater fishes. And what this resolution really did was sort of plant the flag in saying we got to do better than this. We have to rally together as organizations that have an interest in conservation of freshwater fish to mobilize resources and get fish species that are in need of such captive programs. We got to get them into captive breeding programs and coordinate the breeding in a manner that can really support field conservation.
Sure.
So this is a large group of people coming together to essentially push for that. And at the end of the day, this was one of the best supported resolutions of last year's Congress. So it's really the community speaking up and saying, we got to do something, and we got to do better by this.
Cool. Yeah, well, I'll tell you, like, for me, this really hit home because I see the power we have when we all work together. And I've been very fortunate to meet folks such as you and just, my friend Rich Terrell, who is a marine biologist, and we all kind of talk. It's funny because people like you say, we geek out, and some people don't know what the heck we're talking about. But right. We've had some. I really appreciated our conversation we had when you were here, because I'm always wondering, is there something I can do better? Right. And what I like about Resolution 111. Is that it would be, if people get interested in it, it standardizes husbandry skills, and there would be a database. So one of the things I find interesting, I can appreciate what all conservation clubs and groups do. However, the big problem is the database.
Right.
So, in this situation, I think most of the people that would participate would have no problem with a database. And it just really impressed me. And I can't believe I didn't put two and two together with the Shoals program, because it's mentioned, and that's a big aspect of what this program is. And I think it's a good opportunity for people who really want to learn conservation and find the best skills and share information. And we have people like this gentleman right here that gets involved with these programs, that's happy to help. And that, I think that's the biggest thing with conservation, working with critically endangered fish, is getting the right information.
Right. Yeah, and a big gap right now is that we have lots of players, right, out there, but people are not necessarily working together.
Yeah.
And there's some historical reasons for that, right? Like there's some tensions among different groups, right? Zoos and public aquaria, they're traditionally, more hesitant to involve hobbyists, for example, because there's this history of the hobby, not just in the fish, but in sort of the broader pet keeping hobby, right? There's sort of this history of poaching, of animal collections in the wild for the trade, and zoos don't really want to be associated with that, in part because they have their own history, right, of doing exactly that, and having learned the lessons in the 60s and the 70s, and says, like, we can't do this anymore, right? And so while just like sort of zoos have overcome this history of collections in the wild and sort of this questionable animal trade, the hobby is not a monolith either, right?
Right.
And so the question becomes, right, how can we get the right people at the table and figure out how to collaborate? Because it's not as simple as just the willingness of everyone to do this, but there needs to be some checks and balances involved, right?
Absolutely.
And the question is, how do we do that? We don't have the answer for this yet. But one of the reasons we wrote that article is because we wanted to get the conversation going. We cannot have a conversation going unless the different types of people, the different kinds of stakeholders are at the table and actually have a voice to say, well, look, here's what our capacity is. Here's what we're willing to do. Here's the sort of information I'm willing to share, and here's the information I'm not willing to share, right? Right. And so I think it'll probably take some time for us to sort of find a framework that makes everyone comfortable and is productive, with the conservation goals as an endpoint, right? At the end of the day, no matter what we do, we should only do it if it has a net positive effect
exactly
for the species down the line.
I agree. And one thing I've learned, I think that we can learn so much from people such as you, who are actually in the field, seeing these fish in the wild. Now, I know you work a little bit different than what I focus on, but who else can we ask about things we need to understand to fine-tune our husbandry than scientists and researchers such as you, who are kind enough to share with us.
It always requires a village, right? At the end of the day, I also don't consider myself as the front line when it comes to conservation, right? The front line are really sort of the people that steward the land that provides for the habitat of these fish, right? Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes a little bit presumptuous for us to just come in, right, from one of the wealthiest countries in the world to often countries that are much poorer, where the fish we care about come from, and honestly, right, for folks that are living there on site, worrying about the fish might not be the first priority, and so I think part of our of what we have to do, coming sort of from the privileged position that we're in, is not sort of imposing conservation over sort of the front line stakeholders, the people that actually live there, right? But
I agree.
ways to empower them, right, rather than just making demands, essentially.
Sure. And what you find is that once you fully explain things to them and the impact they can make, it gives them a little bit of validation and encourages them to be a part of the programs.
Sure. But it also, includes helping them just with struggles of daily life, right?
Right,
They
exactly.
can actually afford time and resources to support the integrity of important habitat, for example, that's under their
Sure,
stewardship. Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I just, anytime I see videos of all of this work, I definitely take a look into it. What people need to understand that these environments, it's not just impacting fish. You have to sit back and think about it. In some of these environments, things are happening that are making the environment toxic. So it's not just affecting fish. In a lot of these areas, they have villagers that live right in the water. They feed from there. They're drinking the water. So we have to be cognizant that it's not just fish that are being affected; it's also people. And I'm just by cleaning areas where we can introduce the fish back and they're thriving, we're also helping with the health and livelihood of these people in these areas. So I don't think a lot of people think about that much. And,
Right.
so I find the whole thing interesting. Now, one of the things was, I don't know about all of the areas, but I know like in Mexico, farming is a really big part of their industry. So it's just the whole thing, and you're not just helping fish, you're helping the environment, you're helping people, and in turn you're helping yourself because it with the climate. So
Right.
it's a little bit more than all of that. So
Yeah, it's messy at times, right? And in many places that we work in sort of the arid landscapes of North America, both on the U.S. side and the Mexican side, it's not just that the habitat quality is going down, but habitats are just disappearing because water is disappearing, right? The climate is changing. There's less precipitation. There's overpumping of aquifers, so that the groundwater levels have been going down,
right.
and springs are drying out, and that sort of lack of water on the landscape is of course deadly for the fish, but it's also deadly for the livelihoods of people.
Yes, sir.
And so we got to sort of reframe and this, because like, some people argue it's like, well, farming is the problem, right? Because farmers use water for irrigation, and this is what got us into this mess. But in reality, it's not the farmers versus the fish, right? The reality is it's like, if the fish do well, there's also water to farm. And if there's no more water to fit for the fish, there is also no more water to farm. So on the U.S. side, areas where people have farmed for generations, well, we might be looking at the end of those traditions, right? Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, it's not only safeguarding habitat for the fish, it's about safeguarding livelihoods of people and all the things that are connected to those groundwater flows. So it's a big problem, and it's not just about the fish; it's about everything that's attached to it too.
I agree. Okay, so you've spoke at a lot of different events and things of that nature. If there was one thing that you would like to see the hobby itself in our community start to build on, what would that be with fish in general, or you could do with critically, but whatever you think is what we need to home in on and focus on, where we can start improving what we're doing in the community?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that you don't need to teach the fish hobbyists is how to keep fish, right? In fact, like, that's where I think lots of other folks sort of involved in conservation, especially ex situ conservation, we got a lot to learn. Like, innovation is driven by the hobby, right? And so one of the biggest contributions of hobbies to conservation is just that innovation. How, like, advances technology, how do we keep the fish? How do we breed them successfully? Where I think there's a lot of, rooms for improvement. And I'll say transparently, I don't have like concrete advice because for a lot of things we just don't know yet. Is like, one, we don't know how to best manage these. So how often should we exchange fish, for example? We don't know that very well yet. But in order, and there's a variety of research programs sort of going on to figure out like what's the best way to actually do this. But one of the critical pieces sort of to get there is for everyone sort of to transparently sort of talk about what they've got and how they do things, right?
Sure.
One thing that I think there's a lot of room for improvement is just sort of that transparency, right? And I'm not saying every hobbyist needs to be transparent about what they have and how they do things. But if you as a hobbyist want to make a contribution sort of beyond keeping the fish and keeping the fish in ways that might contribute to positive conservation outcomes, you got to be transparent about that, right? And this is something sort of from the experience of being involved in a lot of hobbyist organizations, right? Lots of people say they have things, but then, you know, as soon as there's a need for fish, for example, for research or for other sort of conservation-related projects, the fish are not really there. So how can we, or people are at least not willing to share, right?
Yeah.
And so how can we essentially, you know, find ways for people to share information to the extent that they're comfortable, so we can rely on them, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are in this to really make a positive impact for conservation, we got to sort of rethink how we think about our fish. They're not ours personally anymore, but they're ours as a society, as a community that cares about it. And this is a challenge that the zoos have that I work for, right? We get animals that get breeding recommendations and they get shipped across the country, and they might be the favorite animals of our visitors, but they're not our animals, right? We don't keep the animals for just the enjoyment of our visitors. We keep many of them because they're part of a bigger picture. And then we have to let animals go. We had a polar bear named Kali at the St. Louis Zoo that has been here for many years and was absolutely a favorite, right? But he got a breeding recommendation elsewhere, and then he was gone, right? And so sort of that shift in thinking about how we think our fish, I think that's something where, you know, serious hobbyists have to contend with that, right?
I agree.
So, you know, how do we share and how do we transparently let people know, what we have to share? How do we share when we screw up? Like, the screw ups happen, right?
Yeah.
Some of the females across different species look really similar, and sometimes we make mistakes. Well, how are we transparent about that, right? And so those are some of the things I think we need to think about when we wish to build a larger communities that includes hobbyists and zoos and other organizations to work together, right? And so,
I agree.
Those are the checks and balances that I mentioned earlier, and there are some uncomfortable conversations that to be had about that, right? And this is where we need to figure out, how do we find solutions that sort of maximize participation of everyone that can contribute resources, but also minimize potential errors that can happen.
Right. I agree. And, you know, we all have to respect each other.
Right.
You know, I'm not trying to scare up some drama or anything.
No.
But I have met some people that work with critically endangered fish that are very guarded with what they share, or they don't share at all. And for me, when I decided to start working with these fish, I saw a big area, a hole in our community, so to speak, where people just weren't sharing. So that's why I started this channel. And I share my triumphs. I also share my failures. I've been in the hobby for 50 years almost. And let me tell you, at any given time, something can happen to me. So the first thing I tell people, you know, don't set yourself up for failure. So there are quite a few things, which I won't get into, that I recommend when a person starts. But the one thing I'm noticing is that whether people are guarded with their lines or people are getting lines and then dispersing them really quick, some of the fish are very difficult to find now. And one of them, I was looking to find a new bloodline to introduce to my Cracodon lateralis altabaso, otherwise known as the Black Prince. They're doing fine, but I've noticed they're not producing as many as they used to. And I'm thinking, wonder if I need to reset a little bit. I've been searching for almost a year and no one has any available. And that's startling because that's one of the most popular Cracodon goodeids. And right now their numbers are not there. So this is where I think a program like 111 would help, because we can get sources we can pull out, but we can also diversify the genetic line, because there's a little bit more of an opportunity for diversity there than if we're just homing in on what we have. So I see a lot of pros to the program, and I really hope more people will consider it. Going to take some work to get it there, but I definitely think it would be worth it in the long run.
And I just want to say, I think it's perfectly fine if people don't want to share and if they don't want to make their information public, right?
Sure,
but
absolutely.
You just can't claim that you're doing this for a conservation purpose, right? Because it may not be. You might just be in it for yourself, and that's totally cool, right? Like I have a bunch of fish at home. Not all my tanks are devoted to conservation project. I got some snail cichlids, and you know what? Those are just for my pleasure, and I think it's totally a good enough reason to be in the hobby for your own personal interests, right? I don't think everyone needs to basically subscribe to that sort of transparency, except if you really want to claim that you're a part of something bigger, right? I mean, the other thing that I think, especially so hobbies clubs can do better, and this, you mentioned this just now, right? Like for many decades, so the model has been to for people to collect back points, right? These breeder award programs, and it's all about who can breed more species, right? And we have there's some amazing breeders here in the St. Louis regions, right? It blows my mind when I hear how many species people have bred. And again, this is like an awesome way to be engaged in hobby. But can we maybe also have ways that incentivizes people to keep the same old fish around for years and years and years? This is what Jim Langhammer did, right? Speaking of Cracodon, he got fish back in the day, in the 60s, early 70s, when some of these populations were still around. And up until he gave up the hobby, he had all of those lines year after year after year. He didn't swap them around. And that's what his legacy is, right?
It is. Yeah.
He took stewardship, and he took the responsibility to keep these fish around. And the question is, can we find ways that we can incentivize that in the hobby? And the ALA, the Life Bearer Association, they're trying to do that. They call it the SCAP program, right? I forgot what the name stands for. But it's essentially there as a complement to BAP. We still have a BAP program, but we have a SCAP program that really tries to encourage people to commit to a species or two, and then keep them year after year and make sure they have a healthy stock of it, so that they are around and they are shareable, right? Because the problem with the BAP is that fish get popular, everyone has them, right? They're everywhere. And until everyone has bred them, and then everyone is bored of them, and then they're gone. And with a lot of their rarer species, there's just no way to ever get them back. So thinking about in the long term, how we keep these things around, I think is another really important role that aquarium organizations can play in conservation.
Yeah, one of the things that concerns me with clubs. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not being disrespectful to any clubs, but I've noticed a lot of the clubs in my area, critically endangered fish are being circulated, but I like to term them as unconfirmed critically endangered fish. They don't have ESUs or all of that. And one of the things I'm seeing is, especially with the Eisenai complex, a ton of hybridization.
Right.
And so one of the things I try to instill in people is ESUs matter. Any information you have on that fish matters than just breeding that fish and throwing it out into the community.
Right.
So I'm seeing a great depletion in Eisenai complex, to the point where I don't even know. I had one person come to me one time and they didn't know, like they weren't doing anything intentional, but they had lion's eye and Eisenai together. And I'm like, how do you know the females? And you're now hybridizing because they're different species.
Right.
Up until 2016, it was all one species, but through locations and isolation, they evolved into new species. All the females look exactly the same.
Right.
So you're now polluting the bloodline. So one of the things I try to talk to people about in the community and in clubs is, I can appreciate you want to work with the fish, but this is where I think programs like 111 will help out, because it will teach people the proper way to work with them. Because although I can appreciate people want to work with them, right now, in my opinion, and I mean no disrespect to the community, if the hobbyists don't start to understand just how important it is with a lot of these fish that you're not hybridizing and you're keeping all their data, until that comes, I think we're taking one step forward and three back. Right. So I was really happy when you shared that article with me, and this program, if people get involved, there will be a basic protocol that everyone would agree to. They're not required, but I'm pretty sure they would be part to be in the program. So I like to see structure like that. With me being a nurse for 25 years, protocol means a lot to me.
That's right. And so this is what something that we need to figure out as a community, right? Like, how much standardization is required? Because let's face it, there's probably a half a dozen ways you can successfully breed and keep a particular species, right? So we don't want to take away from sort of those ways. But yeah, how do we, like, what sort of the minimal information we need people to keep track of? Sure. And then also, is there ways we can check it? So there's conversations about, can we have a dedicated lab somewhere that can use genetics to verify that strains are pure, right? And so can we have some sort of sanity check-in on a regular basis that we can make sure that there's not hybridization issues in a particular stock, right? And it also, all this sort of the level of scrutiny all depends on what the end goal is, right? If the end goal is to keep species around in the hobby just so that we can continue to enjoy them, right? Especially for species that have become rare, the scrutiny doesn't need to be that high, right? But if the goal is that we sort of pool our resources to maintain fish populations in captivity that we maybe can reintroduce into nature, like they've done with the tequila split fin, right? Suganectis tequila. Like people are trying to do with some of the pupfishes that are extinct in the wild, or some of the platyfishes that are extinct in the wild, where all that is left is what we have in our aquaria, right? There, the bar suddenly rises, right? And so it also, the level of scrutiny is sort of a little bit dependent on what's the end goal, and I can envision maybe we have some sorts of programs where people can say, it's like, well, I'm interested in contributing just to make sure the fish can stay in the hobby, but like I don't want to go like the extra 5 miles to make sure that my fish could be released into the wild, right?
Sure.
But yeah, we haven't had those conversations, and those are just conversations that need to happen. Like, how do people want to engage? What's meaningful to them, right? And at the end of the day, hopefully something bigger and better comes out of it, and how we work together to bring lasting change to conservation.
Sure. So real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but we've got a couple questions. So we have my buddy Nick. Nick had asked what organizations are out there that we register and confirm. So there's CARES, there's SCAP, and hopefully that in the near future there'll be something with 111. But what I recommend, so all the programs are good, but I'm kind of a little partial to SCAP. And the reason I'm a little partial with SCAP, one of the things they've done is they have a liaison, and my good buddy Tim Hamager is the liaison. So what it is, like you've said, a lot of people are hesitant to put their information out there publicly, and I can understand and appreciate that. With the liaison, Tim, you email him, hey, I'm looking for this fish. And a prime example, 2 years ago, this is what happened. I was looking for Cracodon Los Pinos, and I couldn't find them anywhere. And all of a sudden, one of my good friends who follows me reached out to Tim and said, hey, did you know Ed was looking for this fish? And so it's a really good resource. So I like programs that protect the information of people, but also make it accessible for people to find fish they're looking for. Any recommendations you may have?
Yeah, it depends a little bit what species you're interested in, right? I think the Good Aid Working Group is also an excellent clearinghouse, sort of for good aids. And the Cyphophorus Working Group is really a good clearinghouse if you're interested in swordtails and platyfish. Beyond that, again, CARES is another sort of clearinghouse. But I would say, to make a long story short, for most species, we don't really have exactly that yet. I think this is part of what we need to create, is sort of a centralized, sort of clearinghouse of where people can deposit their information in a way that protects their personal information, right? And the zoos have that for their world, right? So there's stud books and things like that where zoos coordinate. But the current frameworks are just not really made for hobbyists to be a player in that, right? And so we got to sort of rethink of how exactly do we do this, right? Is there maybe a central database for all freshwater fishes? Is it better organized into different taxonomic groups? So there's a group that deals, like we already have, right, with the Good Aid, sort of Cyphophorus. I think this is where the community has a lot of work to do. Like,
I agree.
Really figure out how do we do that? How do we do that so it's not too cumbersome, right? Because let's face it, if it's cumbersome, nobody will do it, right? So it needs to be easy. There needs to be checks and balances to protect people's privacy. And at the end of the day, there just needs to be sort of a central clearinghouse. But I don't think we're at the stage where we can say, so this is how it should look like. I think right now we're at sort of the information gathering phase.
Sure.
Learning what's important to different stakeholders and how can we then bring it all together to sort of serve a majority of them, because likely we can't serve everyone, right?
Right. Yeah. If I could say, I would really like to see all the organizations at least consider a liaison. I think that would help a lot, because it's that middleman, and you don't have to worry about your information being shared, because that seems to be the biggest thing with people with databases. And let's identify the elephant in the room. Most organizations identify that they have a problem with databases, and it's because of that. And it can be a scary world sometimes. So I get it if someone doesn't want to share their information. But I would really like to see groups come up with something that's going to work for them,
right?
Where you can get this information out there. But I'd also like to see organizations like, I think it would be really cool if an organization such as CARES or the ALA did a stream like I do, and do it quarterly, and have people on such as you and all that can help people with this, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I don't feel that there are many people in the, I know there aren't a lot of people in the hobby aspect of it that think this hard about these things, but I'd like to see more information offered to them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, another thing that's very different about the hobby in Europe and in North America is in Europe, in many countries, there is sort of these umbrella organizations where individual clubs and associations have a delegate to the umbrella organization, and so that provides sort of a, it's like a parliament, right? It's where people come together and sort of talk about these big picture ideas, and then these delegates go back to their individual clubs, and that sort of governance structure is just not present in the hobby in the United States. So here it's much harder to sort of bring about this sort of these or initiate these broader projects, because you have to engage with each individual club rather than an umbrella organization where individual clubs have delegates, right? And that I think is our hurdle that we need to think about, like, right, how do you and how do you make sure you sort of engage meaningfully with these hundreds of organizations that dot the landscape here in North America, and as opposed to a much more cohesive body of representatives.
One of the things I like with CARES is they have liaisons within the community with the clubs, and I think that's a really good idea.
I agree.
But one of the things is, maybe I should or shouldn't say this. I don't mean it in a derogatory tone, but in my opinion, I think some of the clubs lose track with BAP and working with critically endangered fish. And it's just like you said, the goal with critically endangered fish is maintaining them over time. I can appreciate, and trust me, what we're discussing may not be for everyone, and that's fine. But at the same time, too, it can't be bred the fish, move on. You find a fish you really enjoy. Because let's face it, I'll be the first to say, some people don't have the space, or they're not as crazy as me to have 100 and some aquariums. I get that. Find something you can stick with and develop it over time, because as you're working with these fish, you'll notice little changes. So, Greg Sage had brought it to my attention about Dowadrioi. He said, and I've had them now for almost 10 years, and I got my original colony from Greg. Over the years, they've changed a little, but nothing that's drastic. The colors on my lion's eye are like a tangerine orange and stuff. So they adjust over time through the isolation and stuff. But I just enjoy keeping them and just to see how they've developed over time. But I think a lot of clubs, and I say this respectfully, kind of miss the boat or just don't understand that aspect of it. So I tell people, when you're working, if you're wanting to work to really do well for these lines, hold on to them.
Right. Yeah. And, my take is always like, it's all good, right?
Right.
The only time I get an opinion is when people claim they're making a positive impact for conservation. Then I take a double take, and it's like, okay, so now the bar just went up. But like, I'm all for fish keeping just for fun.
Absolutely.
That's half of my life, right? And I think we need it to be fun, right? And not everyone has to have serious skin in the game. But I know there's like just amazing aquarists out there that have technical skill and expertise that can make a real difference for conservation, right? And so that's who I really want to get on board here, right? Yeah. Because there is millions of fish tank out there. If we only can get every 10,000s or so to like commit to some serious conservation action, like, we'll do some good, right? And so that's where I'm coming from. Yeah. And then there's all the shades of gray too. And I think this is where the line between fun and really serious conservation where those lines blur, right? And if I think as long as people are engaged and as long as so that they are aware where they stand along that gradient, and as long as they're transparent with their intention, I think everyone's winning, right?
Right.
And I think it gets dangerous for sort of achieving meaningful conservation goal when, people are not serious about certain things and they claim to be serious. And that's where then we essentially jeopardize the end goal, right? Of hopefully do something good for the long-term conservation of particular species. And that's what we don't want to jeopardize.
Well, I tell people, just because I have the passion for them I do, that doesn't mean you have to mirror that.
That's right.
But what I like about if you folks get the 111 resolution up and you're building a database, I would like that because we've got a certain group of people that are keeping those lines true.
Right.
And that's what's going to keep the fish alive. I have no problem with people that just want to play with them. It's your choice. No one has the right to tell anyone what to do in their home or in their fish room. My concern is what happens if hybrids and stuff get mixed up into a program. That's what concerns me. So that's why when I read this, I'm like, I could really get on board with this because. For me, there's only a handful of breeders in the country I'll consider getting bloodline from, because I don't think people are doing anything deliberate. I think a lot of people just don't understand what it takes to keep these lines going the way they need to go. So that's where I could really appreciate this possible program in the future. And it's going to take a lot of.
This is not a problem that's just in the hobby, right? So there was a famous paper that came out a few years back that looked sort of at how well are we doing managing tigers in human care, right? Mm-hmm. And they sort of looked at these different groups of tiger from like the Siberian tiger, the Javan tiger, and so on, right? Indian tigers. So how good are we managing sort of these different tigers of different provenance in captivity? And it turns out not at all. Tigers in captivity are pretty much a hodgepodge of everything else. So like we don't have to be on a high horse and say it's like whoa, in the hobbyist work we don't know how to do this. Like for in the large part in the XC2 conservation world, we have a lot to learn in terms of how do we build systems to sort of maintain the genetic integrity of the species we're interested in, right? This is not like even the professionals, right, have gaps in their systems to do this flawlessly. And so this is something we need to grow as a community, whether you're a hobbyist, whether you're a scientist, whether you work for a zoo or an aquarium, right? It requires expertise from all sides to build systems where we do this well, right? And the problem is we're doing it under pressure, and we're doing it with like a fraction of the amount of resources we need, because a quarter of freshwater fishes is at risk of extinction, right? A quarter worldwide. And we have captive breeding programs for a small fraction of them. We have well-managed captive breeding programs for even a smaller fraction of them, right? And so this reckoning is happening in the community, and there's just a lot of work, and I'm sure we're going to make a lot of mistakes. But the point is that we learn from those mistakes, right? In a way that as we go forward, we get better and better at doing this, hopefully with doing more good than bad along the way.
Sure, I agree. So, well, we've got maybe a few more minutes left. I was wondering if I don't want to hold you too long, friend. I know you're very busy and you're a very busy man. If anyone has any questions, I'm just looking down here. I think we talked about most of them. So you got to forgive me because I vaguely remember, but I know someone had mentioned about a database Cares and Scap for right now are my choices.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I
I
like
hope I
both.
don't tell too much because I don't know all the details yet myself. But it sounds like CARES actually is implementing a proper database model. So
Yeah,
they're going from just having a list maintained behind the scenes to having bringing the care system sort of into the new time of like interactive websites. And there's a lot of work behind the scenes. So
yeah.
you can expect quite a few updates there over the coming months.
It's just been released. And as a matter of fact, Jason Redding, who helps with that, is going to be on stream with me very soon.
Fantastic.
I've looked at the website. I like it. And what it is, too, it's a lot easier to register and get your fish confirmed, because before it would go be circulated out to a few people. From my understanding now, it's going to go directly into folks like you, Dr. Lyons, and people of that such. And that's it's going to be a lot quicker. So
Yeah, and I'm guilty. I have, I think, 2 CARES emails right now that I haven't responded to. And so if Claudia is watching, I apologize, and I promise I will review the live bearer entries too.
yeah.
I'm the reason why this is all slow.
So okay, we have a question here from Ivan. Dr. Tobler, you bridge the gap between academia and the hobby better than most. Is there a lab discovery that changed your home tanks or hobbyist observations that you actually made to a research project?
Yeah, that's great. So number one, yes, we keep fish in the lab the way hobbyists keep fish in the lab. What I've learned, I've built a few fish rooms at university campuses over my years, and what works best is what you all fish nerds do in the basement. So we don't buy the fancy zebrafish racks and all the things. We have drilled fish tanks. We have a central air pump that bubbles everything. We have mutton filters in all the tanks. We got substrate in all the tanks. We got plants in all the tanks. And that comes from the hobbyist community. It's like we do best with our fish if we keep them the way hobbyists do, and that goes down to how we feed and sort of the day-to-day maintenance is this. We're learning it from y'all because you do it best. Very simply. Have hobby things led to research. A few years back, a friend of mine gave me a pair of Alfaro huberi, and they do some crazy courtship. And I had them in a 125-gallon tank at home, and they do these crazy displays. And I was like, this is a perfect research project for an undergrad student. And so Keegan Morrow, who was an undergrad in the lab a few summers back, he set up all these videoing of pairs of Alfaro. He recorded their behaviors, and then earlier this year, he published a scientific paper that describes sort of this novel courtship. That basically was born, again in hobbyist basements, and definitely led to published science. So yeah, it goes both ways, and that's why it's fun for me. I'm still a hobbyist too. I still got fish tanks at home as well. So
yeah. Yeah, it was really it was really an honor having you here with me, where we could just geek out about fish, and I'm very fortunate that I work with a group where I can meet a lot of folks such as you, and it's funny because I get a kick out of the look when people first walk into my fish room. Oh, he's got a fish room. Oh, he's got a fish room.
Yes. Yeah.
So there was a question that I saw. So the person asking if there's a liaison in Chicago, what I would recommend is going on for CARES. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You can go onto the website. You can email them directly, and they can help you out. I used to be the chair for the liaisons, and I know there's a few people out there, but last time I had checked, I wasn't 100% sure about Chicago area. But here's what it is: if there isn't, talk to your clubs and say, hey, I would like to start this program. And you can be the liaison. So if you don't have someone, be that person, because
Yes.
we need more people to get involved. And the thing about it is, even though I'm not very active as the chair with the program, all of the people know I'm happy to help you. So if you have a question, I'm happy. And if I can't answer it for you, I send it up to people like Claudia and Mr. Cummings. The work that man does for this program is phenomenal. Jason Redding, all of these people are willing to help you. And the same holds true with the ALA. So the thing is, if you really want to get involved, the best thing I could say, okay, there may not be anyone in the Chicago area. So if you have a club in the Chicago area, go to your club and say, hey, can we do this? Usually that it has to be voted in from their board of directors. And then if they get to that, we can guide you through it. So don't be, oh, they don't have one. Okay, I guess I won't do it. If you're really wanting to get involved, volunteer to do it. It's not that much work. It's really cool. And what you're doing is making an impact. And it's maintaining these lines. So what little bit of time and effort you put into it can make a difference. That's kind of like my skill on it. Sorry, I kind of get on a rant with it when I'm doing that.
I know how it goes.
Yeah. So, any other questions, folks? All right. I want to look real quick because I didn't want to miss some of these were really good. Okay. Folks, just want to mention to you, JM Aqua 411 is helping Tim. Forgive me, buddy, I forget your name. I just sent you an email last week, so I'm sorry. I am lousy with names. But he's helping Tim. And, that's the thing. Getting involved with these organizations can help a great deal. And it's a really cool program. And we're going to have the big convention coming up soon. I'm excited for that. So...
And one of the funnest part of getting involved in this manner is you get to know all of these other fish nerds. So,
yeah,
I mean, that's always been a big motivation for me. You find like-minded people that want to do the same thing, and then you get cool fish too. That's
sure.
Another great thing. Every now and then, there's just like, whoa, I've not seen that ever. And that's how I got at the Mobius Tower eye from you last time. I was in Pennsylvania. So.
It was so you were here when? I think, was it like September?
I think it was September-ish, yeah.
And I sent you home with. So he's like, folks, I got to tell you what happened. It's really funny. He goes, you got Mobius Tower eye? Yeah, like I've had them for a while. I've been looking for these. So I'm like, well, here I'll send him home with 2 pair. How many do you have now, friend?
Yeah, somewhere between 50 and 60, I think.
It's a really cool fish. A lot of people turn their eyes away from it, but when they go into that breeding cycle, those males get that shimmering blue. I just think they're a really cool fish.
Yeah, I mean, they're like all the platies that I love. If you look at them from just the right angle under just the right light, you see a hint of color. I don't know what it is about me. I just like my fish gray and brown and and with a sheen of glitter, I guess. But
yeah, that's what it is. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to get into some of these wild fish because they don't have color. I respectfully disagree. There's a few of them that do.
Yeah, but they're not flashy.
They're not flat. No, they're not flashy, and I get it. And people like what they like.
Yeah.
But some of us just appreciate a wild fish. But I can appreciate some of the, what's the word I want to use right now? Because I'm totally going blank. Some of the aquarium strains.
Yeah.
I can appreciate it.
Yeah. I just like weird fish. And so they don't have to be pretty. They just got to be weird. And then I'm all in for it.
Yeah. So, well, folks, if that's all the questions we have, I want to take a moment to thank this gentleman, Dr. Michi Tobler. This really meant a lot to me, Michi. I really appreciate it, buddy, and I hope I get to see you soon because it's always a good conversation when we're
I appreciate the invitation. This was great.
So, All right, folks. Well, we're going to sign off for now, and I'm going to have Dr. Tobler's website information if you want to follow some of his work in I believe I already have it in the description, but I'm going to double check. And also, I want to do this because I really like what you're doing with folks and how you're teaching, and people getting into this. Is there any place if someone wanted to support your students, there's something they could do to donate to your program?
Yeah, I mean, the university accepts donations,
Okay.
and you can always just mention our lab's name, and the university will make sure it goes the right way. Also, the American Life Bearer Association has two funds: the Burnt Parish Fund that supports graduate student research, and the James Langheimer Conservation Fund that supports conservation-based projects. And they don't have a lot of funds, but they do support incredibly great projects. So if you are looking to support conservation work, those are also two places where you can donate money, and there's a scientific review committee that makes sure those funds get allocated to deserving projects, and I can highly recommend those.
All right. And if you don't mind, I'll get that information from you here in a little while, and I'll put it in the description, because
Absolutely.
I really believe in these programs. I know you're a very busy man. So
Yeah,
it means a lot to me that you came on.
Yeah, of course, this is fun. And if anyone wants to know anything, feel free to email me. My email is on the lab website too. So
All right.
Always happy to chat.
All right, friends. Well, you have a good evening, and we will see you soon. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.